Hello and welcome to What Does VDI Optimization Look Like? How to Reduce or Replace Your VDI Dependency Without Sacrificing Security. Today's webinar is sponsored by Menlo Security and produced by Actual Tech Media. My name is Scott Becker. I'm from Actual Tech and I'm excited to be your moderator for this special event. Now, before we get to today's great content, we have a few housekeeping items that are going to help you get the most out of this session. First off, we want this to be an informative event for you, so we encourage any questions in the questions box in your webinar control panel. So not only will we have team members responding to questions during the live event, but we'll also have a dedicated Q&A session at the end of the presentation where we're going to discuss in greater detail some of the top questions that you ask. That Q&A panel is also the place to let us know about any technical issues that you might be experiencing. A browser refresh will fix most audio, video, or slide advancement issues, but if that doesn't work, just let us know in the Q&A and we'll provide further technical assistance. Now, second, in the handout section of your webinar control panel, you'll find that we're offering several resources. I'd especially like to call your attention to 5 great resources from Menlo Security. There's a blog on reducing your VDI, a GigaOM radar for zero trust network access, a VDI savings calculator, a white paper on rethinking VDI in the modern enterprise, and a solution brief on modernizing VDI. So just a ton of great stuff there. Hey, one pro tip on a quirk of our platform, sometimes when there are a bunch of great resources like this, if you click them all at once, you sometimes get an error message. So I just recommend clicking each one and then confirming that it opened in a new tab or that it downloaded, then click the next and rinse and repeat. Regardless, I encourage you to access those resources now and share that knowledge with friends or colleagues who might be interested. Now, third, at the end of this webinar event, we'll be awarding a $250 Amazon gift card to one lucky registrant. Of course, you must be in attendance during the live event to qualify for the prize. Official terms and conditions of today's prize drawing can be found in the handout section. Just scroll to the bottom and you'll find the link with the details there. Now, finally, one of the best benefits of this opportunity is of this event is the opportunity to ask a question of our expert presenters. We've got a great panel here, and so to help encourage your questions, we have a special additional prize for you. That's another Amazon gift card, this one for $50 for the best question. After the event is over, we'll look at all the questions that came in, pick out the very best one, and contact that prize winner. All right, with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get to today's timely discussion. So it's my pleasure to introduce you to our presenters today. We have Negin Aminian, who's Senior Manager of Cybersecurity Strategy at Menlo Security. We have Victor Monga, who's Senior Cyber Threat Consultant for EMEA at Menlo Security. And we have David Marshall, Sales Engineer at Menlo Security. Welcome to all of you. So glad that you could be here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
Well, Negin, I'm going to turn things over to you. Take it away.
Sounds good. I'll just skip over a few of the slides. First, to reiterate what Scott said, please ask any questions throughout the presentation. I'll be looking at all the questions come through. I'd love to see David and Victor get nervous with some really hard questions. So please don't be shy. They're extremely technical. No question is too hard for them, I hope. I'll skip over. Like I said, today we'll be focusing on VDI optimization, how we can help you reduce or replace your VDI dependency. And as I said, alongside me, I have Victor and David, who are extremely experienced in the world of VDI and speak to organizations on a daily basis. Now, before we get started, if you're already convinced and want to speak to us, feel free to scan this QR code for a demo and follow up. And of course, there's multiple ways to reach us after as well. Now, before I hand it off to Victor and we get to the core of today, I just want to introduce Menlo Security to those of you who may not be as familiar. We are a pioneer of browser security. In fact, we've been doing this for over 10 years with over 800 customers, over 8 million users across the world and in various industries. And through browser security, we're able to unlock various positive use cases. One of that, helping organizations reduce or replace their VDI dependency. And so today that's what we'll be focused on. And now I'll hand it off to Victor.
Thank you, Nagin, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, based on where you are today and tuning in. I want to start with this one. I have been a VDI user, admin, and architect, so I've seen a few of those pain points and the best use cases of VDIs as well. But I want to start today, and for next 30, 40 minutes, we're going to talk about VDI journey points. Every organization has their own way of looking at why they needed VDI. And we're going to go through that. Is it still relevant today? We're going to help you actually identify those use cases where maybe VDI is not needed anymore. We're going to talk about the challenges that VDI have brought upon us in past decade. Then we'll talk about solution as well. David is going to walk us through some of those solution points where here are the pain points, and here's how customers are actually solving those pain points and challenges. And toward the end, we also have an architecture slide where we get a little geeky and walk you through how those solutions actually work and those reference architectures get deployed in the organizations. So with that, let's start. On this slide, you see the VDI journey points. And as I said, VDI journey is unique in its own way for every organization. It's not one size fits all. Some use cases are as simple as that I want to make sure all of my customers, all of my employees, all of my temp workers, contractors, whatever that is, they come to my environment. That castle approach, we had it and it worked great. But as we started talking to our customers, and all three of us actually talked to our customers, partners, they have started telling us that this approach is outdated now because we don't have castles anymore. We don't have applications sitting in that castle anymore. We have SaaS, we have applications deployed on public cloud, and more importantly, a lot of those contractors, supply chains, a lot of those portals that we use, they're sitting on someone's computer. So how do we make sure that we don't lose control over the visibility, the telemetry, the analysis, and the policies we can enforce? So we were able to just create these broad categories, and we wanna just help you realize where you fit in this journey point. It could be multiple those, it could be one of those. So from left to right, when we start looking at it, it's the first one is very small number of organizations are still continuing to use VDIs because they're not using any modern infrastructure. They're not using SaaS applications for whatever unique use case they have it, and that's okay. They need to continue to support VDI infrastructure because of their use case. But the majority of the organizations that we talk to, they are using modern applications. They are using SaaS applications. They are using distributed workforce, like their employees are actually roaming, their contractors are around the globe. They have temp workers who need access to their private applications. And it's just not scalable to go through VDI hoops. And I will talk about it next slide. What are those different layers of VDIs that I have deployed and used it as well? So these pain points for scalability issues with VDIs, cost and complexity is, oh my God, so high. It doesn't justify ROI anymore. The adoption of zero trust in past 5 years, it has accelerated. I was reading a report, I think it said by next year, 36% of the organizations who are serious about security will adopt zero trust. And for that, VDI had a major flaw in that architecture where we have to trust the user to bring into our environment. And from there, they have almost free reins to lateral move, and they have access to things that they may not need it. And we'll talk about that. Removing the public-facing footprint. Having VDI, it does have a public-facing footprint. It could be as simple as that the VDI portal connects through VPN, and VPN is public-facing, or you have VDI connectors, or the gateways are public-facing. So ultimately, it's boiling down to those pain points where when we started architecting VDIs a decade ago, it made sense. We had that castle approach. The applications were thick lines, and people needed a desktop environment to access those applications. But now, with the proliferation of SaaS and proliferation of distributed workforce, it's just not making sense anymore. The cost is so high, the business cannot justify it anymore. So let's double click on some of these where maybe you can relate your organization, your architecture, your pain points. So first is outdated infrastructure. A lot of companies started with a small set of VDI setup because they needed it for temp workers, contractors, or that unique pool of employees who are traveling. Great. But as the business scaled, the old infrastructure couldn't keep up. As a result, we hired more IT people, we got more infrastructure, and the struggle with performance issues and high maintenance and complexity, it just keeps growing. The next one is it's my least favorite one, user experience and frustration. I cannot tell you as an admin how many complaints I have received that a VDI user will say, "Hey, I just need to access this SharePoint. Why do I have to go through 30 hoops to get to it?" So user experience delays, high latency, cumbersome access processes when it comes to VDIs, and which affects productivity. So the managers, directors are asking IT with how can we actually reduce all of this frustration? How can we make it streamlined that my user, my employee needs access to this application? Why do I have to go through at least 5 hoops to get to it? This makes IT troubleshooting a little bit of kind of uphill battle as well. And the last one is where rising costs. Maintaining VDI infrastructure is so expensive right now. We all have seen it where the renewal costs are so high, then the cost of physical servers, licenses, upgrades, and the constant maintenance from IT perspective, that the time we could have used to solve other problems in IT or security, we're just so consumed in the VDI upkeep where all the employees or contractors, temp workers are using it to actually go to SaaS applications or web-based applications. And we'll talk more about it as we go, other use cases as well. As we are growing these journeys, or as we're building these journeys, one thing we have realized that since the companies, organizations, enterprises are so consumed in actually keeping up with the VDI infrastructure and dealing with the frustration from users, we forgot to take a step back. We forgot to actually sit down and say, is this making sense? And why? If most of your applications are web-based, large number of applications are SaaS or deployed in public cloud, they must have a web front end. If that's the case, do we still need VDI? That's the question. I think it's coming over and over again and again when we are sitting down with the customers, partners, and having that conversation. It comes over and over where we just forgot to take a step back and think about it. We just couldn't have the time to rethink the strategy. And that's where we are just trying to help you here in the next 30 minutes, where let's rethink that strategy one more time with you. Let's help you rethink that so that you can reduce the cost, complexity, and ultimately improve the user experience. So here's a complicated, busy slide for a reason, because some of these components we all have deployed it, seen it at least in when it comes to VDI architectures. They're not supposed to be a reflection of a complete VDI architecture, but they're a reflection of the cumbersome architecture we have when it comes to VDIs. Because it's not as straightforward where you have an application, you have a user, and you have means to access it. That's not that simple. You do have these pieces that they need to work together perfectly in order for a successful VDI deployment. Otherwise, if any one of these pieces fall apart, then VDI infrastructure is not working. And ultimately, user cannot do the day job what they're supposed to do. Consequently, business is impacted. So as I said, I have been a VDI user, not just an admin architect. I have used VDI for contract work, and I felt the pain as well. When I'm traveling, the latency is terrible. One of my friends, actually, he works for a healthcare company. They have deployed a large farm of VDIs, and when we were discussing the opportunity that, hey, do you really need VDI, and how are you guys looking at it? He said, right now, all of my IT and security team are so consumed in upkeeping of the VDI infrastructure, it's hard for us to actually step back and even think about it. It is so overwhelming because there are so many pieces when it comes to VDI infrastructure. But that's what it is. For next 30 minutes, I want you to actually just be relaxed and think about Do we still need VDI? All of these pieces, and for what? VDIs made sense a decade ago or 2 decades ago. VDI really made sense a long time ago. It centralized desktop management, all of those golden images, we needed it, all of those group policies, we needed to push it, allowing remote users access our applications securely because most of the applications were thick client based. But today, I can assure you, if you actually start inventory the applications that the user uses and how much time they are spending in that VDI, most of those applications are SaaS-based or cloud-based solutions, or even internal applications deployed but has a web front end. So VDI feels outdated at this point. So let's talk about some of those architecture discussions and facts here. Just as take a glance at this slide, which shows you the complexity. User devices connecting through all of these layers of infrastructure, connection brokers, AD, physical servers, storage systems, network systems, security solutions that you have to keep up with to make sure that VDI is secure. That operating system patching, vulnerability management. The setup requires massive investment in hardware, software, IT, security, just to keep things running. It's a high cost, high maintenance solution. That's what it boils down to. And we acknowledge that. It was a great solution when we needed to make sure that users come inside that castle approach to access my applications. Let's talk about the second part. It's an old saying, you get what you pay for. But with VDIs, we're not getting what we're paying for. Users are frustrated, admins are frustrated, and ultimately, the productivity is down when we're using VDIs. So with VDIs, we're not even getting what we're paying for. Latency is a major issue when it comes to VDIs. Multiple hops between systems slow down the user experience all the time, which is frustrating when speed is key. So SaaS, cloud apps, you bypass all of that complexity. That was the whole reason decade ago we went to this decentralized way of deploying applications. And all of the SaaS applications you consume today, they are cloud-based one way or the other. So users need access directly to the apps. You name it. Google Workspace, Office 365, Salesforce, Figma, Canva, whatever new work and make sure their productivity is high. They don't need VDI. They don't need yet another operating system. They don't need yet another way of adding a hoop or adding a barrier into their day job. Timeouts was the biggest problem when I was a VDI user. VDI would time out, then I'm logging in again, and then I'm accessing the application, and then logging in again. It just adds too much layers for the end user. We need solutions now which are scalable and can be in parallel with all of these technologies, SaaS and web-based applications, because they can be accessible anywhere. We need to apply the security with them without the frustration and infrastructure burden. So it really boils down to, again, as we progress through today's session, David is going to walk you through that solution architecture as well. But with this slide, with the high confidence, I can say VDI is an overkill. If applications are being accessed over the browser, let's say majority of those applications are accessed over the browser, then it would make sense to apply the controls, the security, and the whole accessibility of the applications as close to that.
Oh, we may have lost Victor.
Yes, we'll move on to a polling question
Sure.
while he jumps back in. But yeah, as Victor mentioned, I think he's back, but now he's gone again. He walked through some of the challenges that are common that we hear from different organizations around VDI, and we'd love to hear, do any of these challenges seem familiar or resonate with you and your team? And yeah, just share. Love to see what people are experiencing when it comes to VDI. Hi, Victor. Did we get you back?
Just wanted to make sure.
No, yes.
Yeah, I think I'm back.
Okay, perfect. Yes. Now just going to give people some time to go through the first polling question, and then we'll share the results with everyone to kind of see where are your peers and other organizations at when it comes to challenges with VDI. It looks like we got the majority of people in, and so if you didn't answer, get in there and provide some kind of clarification, and we'll jump over to the next slide, which is the results. Okay, I'll move next. But overall, we can see that poor user and user experience and high costs seem to be two of the top challenges that organizations here today are experiencing. And that really reflects what all of us are hearing in our conversations every day with different organizations. Dave, Victor, any kind of additions to these results?
No, I think I've been hopping on this point already. Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, I've been hopping on this point. High cost, complexity, that's what we hear. And that's what we are helping organizations to actually just ask that question among themselves when they're sitting together. And does VDI make sense? And what are the challenges? This is just a great testimonial to that high cost complexity is on the top. So.
Yes, and kind of transition to what you've already mentioned a few times is for certain situations, or now it's time to, ask that question, is VDI still the right solution? So I'll hand it back to you now that we have you back, Victor.
Yeah. And again, before I transition and hand it off to David to actually go through the actual solution of the challenges I talked about, this was an eye-opener fact for me. If you had asked me this 2 decades ago or a decade ago that, hey, most of your work, you can do it using a browser, I would say no. But Forbes have done a research, and organizations are saying that 50% of my employees don't need a computer, let alone a VDI. They don't need an operating system. They could do all of their entire job using a web browser. And the other 50% are spending 80% of their time in a web browser. So that's a high number for an organization to invest in an operating system and all that complex infrastructure and poor user experience. What exactly are we buying here? So that's why, again, this is another way of asking yourself, is VDI still the right solution? I would say no, but again, my colleague David is going to walk us through how he helps our customers choose the right path from here. David?
Oh, looks like we've got another question on the board. Is that right?
Yeah, kind of related to kind of the first step in answering that question, is VDI the right solution? And so for those of you on the call, you need to really understand your application profile of your enterprise. And so, yeah, please answer the poll. I'll give it maybe 30 seconds, and then we can go to the answers. And then David will take over on, what is the right step? What do you need to think about? What questions you need to answer to help you in the direction to find your right path?
Yeah, not surprising.
Right.
We're trying to. It looks like we're modernizing that legacy applications. So we're still in that transition, which is what we'd expect.
Yes. So it looks like the majority have a mix of web and legacy apps, but before I moved it looked like a lot more people were adding that majority of their apps are becoming web and SaaS based. Now we'll hand it off to David to, kind of walk through what do you do next?
Yeah. So, when I talk to or when I speak to different organizations about their application access, I usually start by understanding the applications that their users or even mobile users need to access. And that spans the gambit. These applications usually fall into a few categories that we just saw. They either lack control and visibility to the SaaS applications, and they want a uniform security posture against those. And Menlo can solve that issue without hairpinning that traffic back through a VDI infrastructure. So improving that performance and that user experience. Or they want to provide third-party access to web applications behind a DMZ or to internal applications. And they want to do this without having to give users access to the VDI infrastructure or installing an agent on the end device. Maybe they don't manage that end device. Or they maybe not all the applications have a web front end, and they have legacy applications that require network and port access. And that's okay. Menlo can help replace or offset that access or reduce the cost of that VDI infrastructure. And so in the next few slides, I'm going to discuss how Menlo can help and help start that journey of modernizing your application access for your users. And so, this next slide is just an introduction. I will say that Menlo is not a VDI. We are focused on granular access for users to specific applications. And we do this with better security efficacy and user experience by utilizing that user's native browser. And so that shortest path from that user to the application. And, here, I got to advance the slide here. So Menlo solution at its core focuses on what is known as browser isolation. So instead of a user's device or that network that could be untrusted directly accessing the application, a user accesses an application through a surrogate browser in the Menlo cloud. And that surrogate browser is what performs all the fetch and execute of that application and only renders that view back down to the user. And so for internal applications behind a firewall or a DMZ or in a public or private cloud, I can install a connector which can facilitate that proxied access. And that could be for applications that require port level access as well. And so we can give the entire process a virtual air gap. So a true zero trust environment where an application is free from zero-day exploits, and we're not totally dependent on the application developer to deliver security patches. And we can give patch management breathing room. So not only from an application perspective, but also that user or device that we may not manage. And so that gives them not only do not manage, so I don't manage that network either. Right? So we want to keep that in an untrusted way. We want to be able to keep that air gap. And so when a user logs into a Menlo portal or using an extension, it's basically a portal, they are using their native browser and they're going to log in through SSO. So we're going to understand that user and the groups that they belong to. And then we're going to broker that granular access to the specific application that only that user or group needs access to. And so we can do this without the latency or the complexity of VDI infrastructure. And because the policy is performed at the edge or in the Menlo cloud, away from that user's device or network, policies that may include data leak protection, last mile protections like watermarking, copy and paste controls. And by the way, they can't be circumvented because the policy is here at the edge in the browser, in the cloud browser. So that network, that device, I can't trust it. I can't trust it not to circumvent user controls because it could be compromised. And so remember, users and device, it could be on a network that is just an untrusted environment. And so that's how Menlo can provide access to these applications, and including applications that require port and network access as well. And so for those type applications, we would install an agent on that network to access port level and network level access. So we do have a solution for that, maybe a little more intrusive on the end user, but again, that's something that can be installed there and provide access. So what I would also want to do, I want to talk about visibility. And so, what happens is, specifically when accessing browser applications and specifically VDI infrastructure, an admin's visibility into the session is very limited. And so Menlo can change that. We can provide very granular visibility into the user's sessions by giving a complete playback of that user's session to include keyboard input, access to downloads and uploads, and giving the security admin audit capability and proof of access and user intent. I mean, perhaps that user is attempting to do something nefarious, and we need to get their user keystrokes and files as they attempt to upload for an investigation. So not to mention, it's a pretty cool training tool where playback could be essential for supporting that user. And all of the session recordings can be triggered granularly. So that can be done by user, by application, or even triggered by a policy violation. And that sensitive data can be stored in your write-only cloud storage. So Menlo doesn't have access to that information or that data that is stored in your cloud storage. Lastly, we've integrated our search and browsing forensics into a logging platform that's much easier for correlation. So not only will I have log data, I will have log data that points back to that session recording, and all correlated in an easy to use viewer that is installed in your local cloud. So all this functionality is why Menlo Security is a great alternative to VDI. It can help offset or replace that VDI infrastructure and bring better security posture for that access. And so, just to sum everything up, users can now access applications via browser extension or portal. There's no new browser on the endpoint, no configuration to manage on. Everything is done in the cloud browser. And we now have a uniform policy and centralized management. Users use the existing browser, so it's a native browser, Chrome, or whatever they happen to be using to access, independent of the location that they happen to be at, whether they're in a coffee shop or here, like I am, at my local office. No pixelation or slowness like in a VDI, and utilizing that shortest path to applications. Also, last mile controls. Remember, we can do copy and paste controls, watermarking for any type of web page apps, and file downloads. Policy is based on what's configured in the browser, so it can't be circumvented at the endpoint. So a policy based on data redaction, DLP, uploads, downloads, all of that's done in the cloud, away from that user, away from the device or untrusted network that I can employ at the cloud. And don't forget the security of isolation, right? 66 of enterprises applications can be manipulated with the modification of headers, or remember log4j. With Security Cloud Browser, that connection to the application is always on a clean browser, so it's completely separate. And nefarious activity from the endpoint can never reach those applications. And so that's how Menlo adds a layer of protection from internet attacks and infected endpoints, and from even vulnerable browsers. So I'll hand it back over to Nagin to close this out.
Thank you. Now, does everyone see the modern alternative to VDI? It doesn't look like the slides are progressing.
I see it. You're on the modern alternative VDI.
Okay, could just be me. I just wanted to make sure we're all seeing the right content. But thank you, David. Hopefully you guys really enjoyed the challenges and how we can address those challenges. And these next few slides are really meant to wrap everything up and kind of summarize everything we've learned. Now, VDI has provided some benefits to organizations, and it's really been able to achieve these benefits that you see on the left. But for the gaps that we've discussed, earlier, as Victor mentioned, the gaps around cost, flexibility, end user experience, secure application access is able to address those gaps and provide additional benefits while still mirroring the benefits of VDI. So you don't actually lose anything, you actually gain more. Now, here's another polling question. We're really curious to understand, when it comes to application access, what are the capabilities that are important to your team? What are your non-negotiables? Whether that's evaluating a new solution or your current solution, what does something that you gravitate towards as one of the capabilities that are non-negotiable for you. Now, if you select other, I'm really curious to understand, hopefully maybe you can put in the Q&A box, what is that other capability that we're missing here? I'll give it about 30 seconds. Okay. I can't see the results, but David, if you see them, please share.
Yeah. So, we have a mix, but it's mostly around being a data security and centralized management, with a couple in data doesn't go all the way down to the device network or device. And then forensic visibility, which apparently someone thought was cool as well. So all of that, basically access, centralized management, and data security.
Nice. Yeah, nice mix of really important capabilities. Now, because secure application access can mirror the benefits of VDI that we just walked through, while providing additional benefits, we can really support various use cases that you might be utilizing VDI for. And I know there can be overlap. With secure application access, you can, for example, easily use policies to provision and deprovision access for users, whether that's based on username, group, geo, and source IP. And this access can be added and removed within a few minutes, which is especially important for any third-party access or M&A use cases. There's also no need to install an agent to access browser-based applications, which is incredibly useful if you have a BYOD use case. Overall, there's a reduction in latency and increase in security because there's a layer between the user and the application. There's no direct-to-network access. Now, I can keep going on, but I'm very curious about the next poll as well. And don't worry, this is our last poll. What use cases are you using VDI for? Now, while you guys are answering that question, David and Victor, you guys talk to organizations daily on this use case. And so I'd love to hear what are some examples or really maybe important takeaways that you have that we could share with the audience. Sure. Victor, do you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. So I think the majority of all the use cases that you have here, customers are looking into it. But one of the ones that I specifically talk to is merger and acquisitions, M&A. So when a company acquires another company, the new company employees need access to the parent company's HR system or SharePoint or some internal applications. They're all web-based, but they need access to it. Traditionally, what it used to be that I will set up VPN tunnels, or I'll actually have them ship new laptops, but that takes time. So usually it used to take 8 to 10 weeks just to extend a SharePoint website to the new company's employees. That has significantly reduced using Menlo, and if it's not 8 minutes, it's now that if the technology is already installed and deployed, within minutes, you can extend that application to your new company using the same IDP identity provider that you have. Now, that's a game changer for a lot of companies because now the 8 to 10 weeks that the new company is not adding any productivity, now immediately all the new employees can actually add back to the company. They can fill out the forms that they need to, start getting paid, whatever they need to get it done. It's so instant. Now the new companies actually be able to actually work it out. So M&A is a huge use case. I've seen a good chunk of people going there. The second one is threat hunting. That a lot of threat hunters, they don't want to use their browser to go to these nefarious websites to look at it, what they are. A lot of threat hunters go to dark web. They don't want to use their browser. So that's a unique use case. I've seen it. That was one of the use cases where people set up a separate VDI farm with a separate ISP just to go to a website. That's another use case I've seen it. David?
Nice. Okay, David, we go to your
Yeah,
example that I'm very curious about. I just want to maybe share the polling results.
Sure.
Nice. Okay. Any kind of thoughts on these results?
No, I think it kind of leads really good into, I guess, our next use case slide against third-party access and that remote hybrid workplace, right? That's where this case study comes into play, and this is more for an insurance or I guess a financial institution where they have several agents out there that are part of either a remote workforce or they're third party where they're using their own devices and perhaps they don't manage it, right? So they're not a managed device that they happen to be using. Menlo is able to give that institution, their users, access to a portal. And in many cases, we could give them an extension, a browser extension as well, where they could still access the applications and quickly and easily access either the SaaS applications they have, as well as a uniform method of delivering those same last mile DOP and access and forensics against those internal applications too. So we could have the connector, they had access to those internal applications as well as access to SaaS, and we were able to bring in a nice uniform policy against all of them. And without having to install any agent and be able to have them in a not trusted device or even a not trusted network and still provide that last mile capabilities without them trying to circumvent it or take advantage of the application or eliminate that risk. So that's that.
Thank you. Yeah, I think that's a common use case that we're hearing over and over again. Now, that kind of concludes the main aspects of our presentation today. Feel free to add any last-minute questions before we go to the Q&A. I took a little glance earlier, and I think there's some interesting questions, but please, we want to make sure we address any questions the audience has, so feel free to get those in. In the meantime, feel free to scan this QR code if you would like to continue the conversation, if you want a demo or any type of follow-up. You might actually have a personal conversation with David, which is always fun. He's really funny, trust me. But yeah, feel free to scan that, get your last questions in, and now we're going to go to the Q&A before we wrap up today's presentation. Now, for our first question, can Menlo Security solution work with an enterprise browser implementation? And if so, can you reference a use case who has? Which is an interesting question, and I'll let one of you answer.
I'll take it. So I imagine, and I guess this is an unusual one. So you have an enterprise browser. So Menlo doesn't matter what browser you happen to use. We can turn the Internet Explorer, a Chromium browser, or an IE into an enterprise browser. We can even utilize that enterprise browser to proxy sessions to in an isolated state. So basically isolating that entire access and providing that real zero trust atmosphere. So your enterprise browser is installed on an untrusted device. It's also installed and it's being utilized on a network that you may not trust as well. So it's hard to trust anything installed on that device, even an enterprise browser. And so you want to be able to proxy that, or at least get that access in a, I would say, air-gapped situation where now I can employ policies at the cloud so they can't be circumvented, and that way give that access. So answer yes, of course. It doesn't matter if it's an enterprise browser or your implementation of a Chrome or whatever you happen to be using. Hope that answers that question.
Yeah, and I think just to reiterate that point is, of course, this is enterprise browser market, and within that there's replacement browsers that kind of we're hearing about. And a key differentiation with Menlo Security is you don't need to replace your browser of choice. Your users can continue using Chrome or Edge, whatever their I guess, enterprise browser is, and Menlo Security works with their browser of choice. So you don't interrupt their user productivity or what they know and love. So next question, what is the most important first step in your opinion for reducing VDI dependency while retaining or improving security?
I can take this one. And then Dave, I'll pass it on to you for your opinions on it. I think the first thing if you are on the journey to reduce your VDI footprint, I think the first thing you want to go and inventory the applications being used within that VDI. You want to look at it. What is my user doing when they are actually accessing VDIs? Once you recognize that, you will be able to consolidate that, and using Menlo, be able to give them a seamless user experience and yet provide the last mile DLP, zero hour phishing, and all the security features that you would need with the forensics capability that you don't have it with VDI. So the first step would be go look at what users are actually accessing and using the VDI for. Second is coming back and consolidating that with the better improved user experience and improved security controls that you would need. David?
No, I mean, that's just it. All right. You can start with that low hanging fruit of application access and web application access. Understanding the use case. You have a lot of unmanaged users out there that you can't install anything on, or maybe they get rid of it, or maybe you don't trust it. And that application access can be very much utilize the Menlo solution for SaaS and internal applications. Obviously, we want to modernize those and start web wrapping applications, but that's where I would start. And then I'd move into some of the other, connection oriented type of applications and giving access to those users. Right. At the end of the day, it's user access to the application and do it in a very secure manner. Obviously, we want to bring in that forensics level detail and session recording for those untrusted applications. So I think that's the main thing I'd start with. Usually is what my customers end up starting with.
Nice. And this next question is a little longer. We have been using VMware Horizon since 2014. We are on the third iteration of our VDI environment. We have VDI configured for external access via Microsoft Authenticator MFA. Is there any other security that we could easily implement? Is there any suggestions for best optimization practices to smooth some programs to be less resource heavy? Is using servers for 2.1 CPU too slow for VDI? Could this be one of our downsides?
So, yeah, can you hear me? So infrastructure is always a hard thing to manage, right? When you're looking at VDI, and the answer is always in a VDI infrastructure is to add more, throw more resources at it, right? You just throw more money at the problem, and hopefully that solves it. I mean, with Menlo, what we're hoping to do is try to offset that spend and offset that access by removing some of the web applications from that VDI environment, and maybe removing some of the application access from that VDI environment to have direct access through that isolation. And so thereby freeing up your VDI infrastructure for some of the more legacy applications that will require a lot of that CPU process. Effectively move the applications Menlo can take care of right off the bat over to Menlo. Web applications that are behind your public or private cloud, stop hairpinning traffic through it. And then keeping that access or that resources for the applications, legacy applications that don't need it. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I'll add 2 cents to it, David, if that's okay. In the question, you mentioned that Microsoft Authenticator, that you're using it. So that's the beauty with Menlo. When you are integrating your user access, you are maintaining that IDP posture. There's not another IDP you have to manage. So if you think about it as a triangle, you have users who are used to of their credentials logging into your application using Microsoft, their AD credentials, network credentials, and Microsoft Authenticator. they use exact same when they are accessing your applications using Menlo. It's not yet another credentials. It's not yet another MFA. It's exactly the same. So that seamless user experience comes in. But now you as an admin have full control over what the applications are doing and how the user is interacting it. Do you want to enforce some rules in it? If there's sensitive data, maybe you want to redact it right then and there in the web application. So even someone is inside the thread is taking pictures of it, they can't see the data. So all of that, it's on the browser when they're interacting with the application right then and there. It's not after the fact that they downloaded something and malicious in the VDI and then the EDR kicks in. It's within the browser, all the security controls using the same IDP that you already have. And to David's point, once you free up those VDIs to access these applications outside of the VDIs, now you have a resource pool that you can put it back for those legacy applications. Make sense?
Yes, thank you. Now let's select 2 more questions before we wrap up. This one, I think we might have to infer maybe a little more. Oh, getting more questions in. I guess, is Menlo security, here. Sorry, I got a few more questions in at the last minute. Let me go back to, so what are the best cases for VDI for diverse groups, 36 pools with only 600 users? So I think we mentioned we're not a VDI solution, it's an alternative. And so what kind of insight can we provide here?
Oh, I guess I'll take that. Yeah, a diverse pool of users. So that means probably I can infer that you probably have many different profiles. Maybe you have different groups, HR, you have third-party users that are accessing it. You want to be able to identify those users and groups, integrate into an IDP so we understand the users and groups and personas that are accessing the applications, and then mirror the applications or current functionality in last mile type of functionality that we want to put into that access. Obviously, you want to put in some DLP policies. You want to be able to put in some last mile policies, and we can do that in a granular way within Menlo. So I can put in DLP policies against different groups, and they could be different. I could put different last mile functionality in there too. Maybe my third party, I want to watermark some things. I can do that granularly by understanding the user and group, and then apply those policies at that group level, independent of the application. And so those type of granular policies that we can put in place, obviously forensics level, I want to start keying those forensics anomalies and start recording those sessions that do violate policy down to forensics level as well, or maybe those nefarious users or users that are maybe untrusted to start recording those policies as well. But I think granularity and the granularity of policy is important, especially with that type of diverse of user group personas.
Nice, thank you. And now I have one last question. David, this might be something you can help with. It might be a question you get from your customers or different organizations you work with. Is Menlo Security leveraging any AI for automating security alerting or monitoring for weak protocols, notifying if endpoints are not adhering to data protection policies? So
Menlo does utilize AI. We can understand if you're using weak security, maybe you're using a lesser version of Apache that's super easy. But for our security apparatus, when you're accessing SaaS applications, or even when users are accessing the web, this is another product that we have, but we can identify a phishing site and be able to do that utilizing basically computer vision. And we're also utilizing the DOM inputs, so where the passcode is on the page. And then we're going to be able to articulate that and understand whether that site is authentic or not. Maybe your users are logging into what they think is a SaaS application, but it's not. And then we would block that application access. So keep them in a very secure security posture, even if you don't necessarily manage that end device right, is something that Minnow can do. So answer is yes, we do use some AI, especially when it comes to understanding the relevance or whether that site is authentic or not.
I'll add
Thank
2 cents to
you.
that, Nagin, if that's okay. As we look at the device posture, it is part of the access rules. If you have an application that's highly sensitive and you want to make sure the contractor or temp worker, if they need access to it, they need to have file vault, they need to have password on their computer, they need to have encryption, they need to have EDR, they need to have all of these. Like, you can configure these attributes that you must comply with before you get application access. So that is also part of the device posture check before you get access to the application. And if that changes, your access is revoked. That's one of the things that the check is dynamic. So as soon as the posture is changing, now your access is revoked from the application.
Thank you. Thank you both for answering all those questions. Apologies for those of you who we didn't get to questions. We're about to reach the top of the hour. Thank you for joining us. And as I mentioned, we're happy to continue any conversation, answer any questions on how to take those first steps to understanding what path is right for your organization. And of course, thank you to Victor and David for all that information. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, everyone.
All right. Well, thanks to Nagin and Victor and David for that really informative presentation. And we do have one more piece of business before we wrap up today. And that is the Amazon gift card prize drawing. And the winner of the $250 Amazon gift card today is Chris Fraker from Arizona. So congratulations to Chris Fraker. We'll be in touch to get you your card. And with that, on behalf of the Actual Tech Media team, I want to thank Menlo Security for making this event possible. And thanks as always for attending and for your great questions. That's going to conclude today's event. Have a fantastic rest of your day.